Hey, Not From Boston fans. Just a quick reminder that this episode is part two of last week's episode around Cora's firing. It was what I had originally planned for the episode, which was basically about what to do with the Red Sox after Craig Breslow is inevitably no longer the chief baseball officer. So, enjoy. Funny is, obviously we started the show by talking about how Alex Cora was no longer with the Red Sox. But I had been planning this episode for the last couple of weeks around, because I was inspired by an article that Jen McCaffrey, a friend of the pod, wrote for The Athletic, where she talked about Craig Breslow's, and where he was at in the life cycle of the Boston Red Sox GM, traditionally speaking. Because, and we'll get into that more in a minute, but it did have me thinking because I personally, again, I've had a lot of concerns over the last, about 3 years about how this club is currently operating, and about the reports that that we're all reading and hearing coming out of the leaks in this front office. There's a lot of kind of nuance that seems to be lacking in that front office. But, based on that reporting, I think everyone has a lot of concerns. And a lot of people, I think, especially even after firing Cora, you can look around online, you can go listen to Section 10, you can go listen to Foul Territory, Ken Rosenthal, everybody seems to be on the same page that, barring a miracle, turning this ship around, this is also Craig Breslow's last year as chief baseball officer, that his back is against the wall, and this was an example of him trying to protect himself and buy himself some time. I think that's, I can't say for sure whether or not that's true, but I think that's really an interesting, I don't think that's probably not that far off from the truth. So anyway, with all that in mind, before Saturday, before this news broke about Cora, I was planning a podcast episode about what will happen when Craig Breslow's gone. And I thought about ditching this idea because we had all the Cora stuff to talk about, but we've talked about it. And I still think it's true because I still think it's relevant. I still think that Craig Breslow, no GM lasts forever anyway, so this will happen at some point. He will not be the chief baseball officer of the Red Sox. But I do think just the way that things currently stand, he's in a very hot seat. And I think it's worth talking about also just in terms of I've articulated before where I feel that the Red Sox organization, both with Breslow and with Chaim Bloom, where leadership has kind of fallen short for this organization, and where ownership has fallen short, and what the Red Sox, I talked very sporadically about all the ways I think the Red Sox could be better as an organization. And, so I thought I would give you guys a rundown on this. So before we do anything, we got to get into some context. Craig Breslow has been the Red Sox chief baseball officer for 917 days. And you can see that his last three predecessors, Chaim Bloom, Dave Dombrowski, and Ben Cherington, none of them made it past 1,500 days as general manager or president of baseball operations or what have you of the Boston Red Sox. So, point is, Breslow's clock with this team is starting to run out, in theory. I can't pretend that Craig Breslow hasn't done good things. He traded for Garrett Crochet and then locked him up to an extension. I think generally his extensions are good because they're not so much money that is consequential. Extending Rafaela and Bayo and Campbell, even though he's in AAA, and Roman Anthony, those are all low risk, high reward contracts. No organization should be, if any of those guys were to be moved, no organization is going to say, I don't want a guy for 6 years, 80 million, or 8 years, 80 million. That just doesn't seem like a fair cut. That's $10 million a year. That's I think for a lot of organizations, it's chump change. So like it's completely reasonable and manageable. He's not blowing up the payroll. He did trade Rafael Devers. And we've talked about why, and we all agree that that's dumb. He also fumbled the re-signing of Alex Bregman. Also dumb, especially because he traded Rafael Devers. We went from having 2 elite third basemen to having none. And that's bad. No other way to put it. He has put a greater emphasis on the pitching pipeline of the farm system, again, at the expense of position players. So he's kind of doing the inverse of Heim, where that development is kind of now flip-flopped. He's like, let's focus on pitching. And so our farm system is, again, it's looking fine, but it's looking a little uneven. I have definitely a lot of concerns also just about the pipeline itself. Breslow also struggles with decision-making. Less that I think compared to Bloom, who needed everybody's opinion, Breslow wants nobody's opinion. He's like very insulated from reports. He has a close inner circle. He has, of course, that model that he adores. But he also is like very unwielding from whatever consensus comes out of the model or like his inner circle. Reports are he'll bring a trade proposal to another team, and another team will say, that doesn't really work for us. Like, how about this? And Breslow will be like, well, that doesn't work with our model. Like, we want this. And it's like, that's not how trading works. Yeah. And then he fired Alex Cora in, I think, the poorest, like in the worst way possible in terms of how that was handled. So that's our quick little rundown. So I think the question becomes, what comes next? What does come next? What is the direction of this franchise? Where does this go after 2026? What's the philosophy? What's the approach? And I think the answer is balance. I think balance is really important for this franchise. I think top to bottom, everything's got to be about balance, whether it's like team organization, on the field, off the field. Balance is key. You got to balance, I think, 4 key things. Because in this scale, there are 2 categories. There's a sustainable future and there's present urgency, present urgency to win. And you have to keep those things balanced. And I think you can do it. You have to balance a holistic development pipeline, keeping your minor league system strong without, coming at the expense of your major league roster. And at the same time, you have to rebuild that major league roster to be more actively competitive, again, without depleting the farm system. You also have to create a winning culture. And that's harder to do because that's kind of intangible. But you need to build throughout the organization, from the front office down to the major league clubhouse, down to even, frankly, the minor league system of like, the Boston Red Sox are winners. We're here to win. We're here to do what it takes to win. This is not about this is not about anything other than what helps us win the most ball games and win a title. And doing that together. I think that part's really important. Doing that together. Finally, mature communication. And again, this comes from this goes inside the organization from the front office down to the minor leagues. It also is outside the organization. Outside the organization in terms of how players and managers and executives communicate with the public. Because trust, there's not really any trust anymore between Red Sox Nation and the organization. It's pretty broken. People are pretty upset. I'm pretty upset. So you need to kind of rebuild that with more thorough communication. So to do this, we need a new chief baseball officer. And I was doing some reading around, and obviously there are, I think because the Red Sox are so infamous for their turnover in this position, it's going to be really hard to fill it. So we're not going to pretend that we live in the real world. In this case, we're just like, I'm just putting what is in my head in this podcast, in terms of what I think, what types of individuals who work best in this type of role, or in this type of scenario I'm talking about, where the Red Sox are doing a bigger reorganization. I think, having a leader with experience is paramount to me. Jeff Kingston and Billy Gasparino are both guys who do that. They're both currently pretty high up in the Dodger organization. Jeff is the assistant GM. He's the former assistant GM of the Mariners. And he has experience in baseball ops and in player development before. So he's a really well-rounded guy with a lot of leadership experience, and I think he would be a great fit. I'm personally a little more partial to Billy Gasparino, just because he's younger. His background is almost exclusively scouting. He was the former director of amateur scouting for the Dodgers. He was a scouting director for the Padres, and now he's VP of baseball ops. I really like him for this because he is now getting the front office experience and like the major league experience of leading an organization like the Dodgers that competes to win. He's someone who I see as, like, with his experience, having both feet, one foot on either side of the door. David Bell is, I think, kind of a unique choice because he is formerly a manager. He managed the Cincinnati Reds back in the 2010s, I want to say. He's currently an assistant GM for the Toronto Blue Jays, which is kind of interesting. I think, again, has player development experience. Again, he has kind of both experience with the analytics, with the data side of things, and with the feel of the game, on the field experience. Finally, Sarah Goodrum Thompson is someone who I just kind of found in my research who I was like, hey, this is actually would just be an interesting person to run an organization. Her experience is mostly in player development, in being the hitting coordinator in the minors for the Brewers, and being the former director of player development for the Astros. Currently works for the Miami Marlins. I think in terms of building up, another young core, I think that she would be really great at that. I've used the terms chief baseball officer, president of baseball operations, general manager pretty interchangeably. And it's like, Bennett, what do these even mean at this point? And the answer is they don't really mean anything. But in this context, Theo Epstein used to be general manager, and the role that he had has evolved into what is now either president of baseball operations or chief baseball officer. A GM is now someone who kind of sits under that role, but is still, kind of the second in command, still in charge of a lot of those executive duties in terms of running the front office. Craig Breslow has said since he got here, he said that he plans to hire a GM and he hasn't done it yet. And I do think that's part of the problem. I would want to hire a general manager to work under whoever the new chief baseball officer is. I think a great candidate for that in that case would be Kevin Gregg. He actually is the former VP of media relations with the Boston Red Sox, and he's currently the VP of baseball communications with the Philadelphia Phillies. You can see where I'm kind of going with this because I think the GM, I think having someone like Gregg in the GM role would be a great opportunity to shape that role as the arbiter for rebuilding the relationship between the organization and the media and the public. As GM, Gregg could be responsible for articulating what the organization's vision is, both to the public and running a front office that is united in that vision and making sure that communication in the office runs really smoothly, because that is something that they haven't had in a number of years. Like even before Breslow, there's been a communication gap throughout the organization. So closing that, I think, is really paramount, and that's where I think the GM would come in. So let's going back to this balance: holistic player development, rebuilding the major league roster, creating a winning culture, and mature communication. Holistic prospect development, there are kind of four key things I think are essential here. One is rehire the scouts. Craig Breslow fired a ton of scouts in his in just the first year and a half of his time with the Red Sox. I think really minimizing scouting is not ever a good idea. I think relying on, there's a lot of good data in baseball, but there is also the eye test. There is also what you can see and hear, and there are intangibles that are important to recognize in a player. The second thing is finesse and pitch mix. We are, I think, toying a lot with players Bayo is an example where his arsenal seems to always be in flux, which is frustrating because it feels like Andrew Bailey or somebody identifies a pitch mix that works for him. And by pitch mix, I mean like the order in which you throw pitches. And we don't have that. I think, moving that around a lot is really confusing. I also think we're building up a lot of pitchers who are one type of pitcher, which is that Craig Breslow loves a hard-throwing left-handed pitcher. You just look at Peyton Tolley, Garrett Crochet, Connolly Early. Ranger Suarez is kind of that, but he's more of a finesse pitcher. And I think finesse pitchers are really valuable because sequencing your pitch mix, is a really good skill because it's got you force batters to overthink, to make decisions early that often don't pan out for them. I think getting in their head, it's a really important skill. Thirdly, fundamentals, both for hitters at the plate and on the field. There have been several reports about how the Red Sox farm system does not focus on the fundamentals of baseball and instead focus on these analytics like bat speed, like sprint speed, like how hard you throw, all these kind of metrics that add up to being, in theory, a good ball player, but they're not teaching them like, hey, hit your cutoff, man. Or, hey, wait, like in this situation, when you're running the bases, like this is not a good opportunity to steal. Or this isn't a good opportunity to be aggressive. There's not a lot of teaching about discipline at the plate and saying like, hey, like just, don't worry about your launch angle. Don't worry about getting, these like smaller, almost imperceptible things right. Put the bat on the ball and put it in play. Like that's important. We want to get on base. We want to stay on base. We want guys to move you around the bases, and we want to score runs. Like fundamentally, we have to just teach. I think baseball, and I think this is true for a lot of teams, not just Red Sox. A lot of baseball people nowadays aren't teaching that, which is funny because like that's the point of the game. The game is to get on base and score. You want more runs to win. And if you're pitching, you want strikeouts. You want balls on the ground to get fielded for outs so that they don't score runs. Why we've lost track of that and are valuing metrics as if they are the point of the game is just beyond me. So I think returning to fundamentals at the core of development is really important. And then fourth is invest in psychology. I think people underestimate what the thought process is when you're going up against a pitcher. If you have a guy with an arsenal of 5 pitches and you know that he leans on one of them as his first pitch 85% of the time, you're probably looking for that pitch first, right? So that's an opportunity to sit back and hit that pitch because you're ready for it. And if he does what he does 85% of the time, then that should hopefully work out for you. It doesn't work if he decides to mix things up and he says, I'm going to actually throw this pitch that I throw 15% of the time, first pitch. And that pitch might break. It might be a curveball. It might be a slider. It might be a changeup that just catches you off speed. And you're sitting for that pitch that he throws 85% of the time and you don't see it there. So now you've swung and you miss. But now you're thinking about, okay, well, what's the next pitch going to be? Because in my head, if he was throwing the pitch that he throws 85% of the time, the next pitch logically would be his, off-speed breaking, whatever. But he screwed that up. So now what's he going to do? Is he going to go in reverse and throw that fastball that he throws 85% of the time first pitch? Like, what does he throw normally the second? Do you see how, like, I'm digging myself a hole just talking about it? Like, that's where you want batters to be. You want them thinking because it's very hard to swing and hit the ball, honestly, just from experience, like just even being in the cage. It's hard to hit a ball when you're thinking. It's really, really hard. You have to not think to some extent. I think investing in players being thoughtful about that psychology, thinking about what the pitcher might be thinking to pitch, and as a pitcher, thinking about what the batter's expecting and playing off of it, not just, just not, being aware of it. Like, I think that's really important. Rebuilding the MLB roster. I think pretty simply put, a lot of these guys need to get traded or cut. And more importantly than anything, there needs to be veteran leadership. I think that's important to building a winning culture is you need a veteran leader. Signing Alex Bregman would have been a great example of doing that. So it sucks that that's not an option anymore. The free agent class in the offseason between 2026 and 2027 is not great. Also, there's a potential lockout, which would make things rough, but let's pretend that lockout's not going to happen. I don't think it is. You have Ian Happ, who's a great hitter, but who is an outfielder, and we have plenty of those, even though I think the Red Sox need to trade some. Ronald Acuna Jr., also an outfielder, also a great hitter. The Braves would not have to not exercise their club option on him. So who knows? Really, I mean, you want a third baseman because that's the position that seems to have the biggest hole in it. Bo Bichette has an opt-out after this year with the Mets. Again, the Mets are kind of a hot mess right now, but who knows where that goes. Maybe he wants to stay and continue to make that boatload of money. Maybe he wants to, like Bregman, opt out and get a different contract. He's a great hitter. He would do very well at Fenway. They should consider that. Otherwise, trading to the Giants for Matt Chapman or to the Dodgers for Max Muncy, both, again, veteran quality third baseman who can score runs, drive guys in, and play the position well. Like, I think those are all kind of, again, no-brainers for that to be considered in terms of adding a veteran presence. When you're looking at a 2027 roster, it basically boils down to this. You want Carlos Narvaez or Connor Wong at catcher because Connor Wong, I guess, is good again, which is crazy. Maybe putting a more veteran presence in place, but Narvi is kind of the captain of this team anyway, so right now I haven't figured out how to fix that role, but I think Narvaez and Wong should stay, looking long-term. Contreras is obviously staying at first base. He's a leader. That's great, but he can't work alone. Marcelo Meyer or Franklin Arias, Franklin Arias is the top position player prospect currently in the farm system. He's on a tear offensively right now I want to say he's in Portland still. He's not in Worcester yet, but he's tearing the cover off the ball. He's great. He's, I think, due up maybe later this year. I think he and Marcelo Meyer are both, more than competent. Both are pretty, I think, above average. Both are good middle infielders. And I think them being the middle infield makes the most sense in the world. We'll get to Trevor Story in a second. A veteran with pop at third, I think, is critical. I think that's why I lean more toward like a Bo Bichette or a Matt Chapman or Max Muncy, someone who fits that mold, taking over at third. Caleb Durbin, you're a bench player now. Roman Anthony, of course, staying in left. Rafaela staying in center. Abreu staying in right. We've traded Jarren Duran. Trevor Story is DHing. He's done playing the field. He is DHing. In terms of pitching, the rotation is mostly the same. I do think trading Brian Bayo, I'm kind of on board that train now, even though he is terrible. I think a different right-handed pitcher who's more of a finesse guy like Ranger Suarez. I think Brandon Woodruff is a good example. Sandy Alcantara honestly has been back to being good again, so like maybe him. Who's to say? But really that rotation is right now solidly left-handed. Crochet, Suarez, Tolley, early in my mind. In the bullpen, I think again there's a lot of cleaning out there. I think Weisert's out, to name at least one. But I think there's a lot of really good in there still. I think exercising the option on Whitlock is imperative to keep him around. Jake Bennett, who we traded for in the offseason, I think has also got a lot of he's got a high ceiling. Tyler Uberstein, who we've seen pitch a little this year. Yep, great. I think we need a legit long reliever. I mean, I think a former starter who is in the days where they cannot really be trusted to go that long anymore. I think Tanner Houck or Cutter Crawford, assuming they're healthy, would be great candidates for that. But I don't know. But I do think putting someone in the bullpen who has length behind them so that we don't burn out our bullpen when our starting pitching starts to suck like it has this year and also last year, that would be really handy. Finally, a new closer because Chapman has an option for next year, doesn't he? Fuck. I really want to get rid of him because I still am mad at him. Still don't like him, for, domestic violence. But yeah, more or less, these are all kind of key pieces to, I think, building this roster in a way that is a little more mature and a little more ready to win now than it is currently. I think it's not a lot of changes on the field, but I think it would actually make a lot of difference. And I do think the fundamental stuff that I mentioned would be really helpful, both to the major league team, but really to the development of the minor league team and strengthening them back up. Talking about communication, though, I think we look at this example, Rafael Devers comes in. He says, to Craig Breslow, hey, man, I see rumors that you're trying to find a new third baseman. What's the deal there? And Craig Breslow says, oh, yeah, don't worry about that, Rafi. You're 100% our third baseman, which is, more or less what happened before signing Bregman. Cora's in the corner. They're saying, Craig, what the fuck? So that's an example of like bad communication. Like why you would not communicate to one of your players, especially your star player like that. Like, hey, we are exploring a roster move, and letting him think that you're not. And then he gets blindsided by that when it happens. Like that's really, that creates problems that snowball into what we ended up dealing with, which is where we had to, where Breslow ended up trading Devers, and now we don't have Bregman and everything sucks. So what's an example of like good communication? So let's say hypothetically that, Trevor Story is going to, the GM's decided Trevor Story, he's going to be a DH from now on with the Boston Red Sox. We got to tell him. So call Trevor Story into the office. He's like, hey, man, you want to see me? And you say, hey, Trevor, yeah, have a seat. Look, Trevor, we want you to be our designated hitter next season. And he might not react well to that. He might say, are you kidding? Like, hell no, I'm a shortstop. I've always been a shortstop, and I can still play shortstop. Like, I'm not moving off of short. And in that case, like, that's uncomfortable. It's a difficult conversation, but you have to have it. Like, otherwise, you'll build resentment between the two of you, between you and him and the organization, maybe between him and other players. And you'll have, again, a Rafi Devers situation. So in that case, it's like, hey, man, I get it. And I'm really sorry that like this is what it is. The truth is it has less to do about your ability to play this position and more to do with what puts us in a position in the best position to win. Okay? Like we think that playing Marcelo and Franklin up the middle makes us stronger defensively, and we need Franklin's bat in the lineup. So we also don't want to lose yours. Obviously, you still have incredible value to the team. You're still a great leader to the young guys here. We want to maximize our roster, to the best of our ability. And to do that, I think we need you at DH. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Do you understand? And he might, again, like, we're talking about people here. Like, he might not respond well to that. He might still say, I don't like it, and I'm still pissed, but like, I understand where you're coming from. I just don't like that that's what you've decided to do. I need to, think about this process. He may ask for a trade. And of course it's like, if that's what you want to do, if you want us to trade you, look into a trade, we'll absolutely do that. Because we don't want you to be here and be unhappy. But like, we really hope you understand. We hope you stay with us because we think we can win together. We think you can do a lot of good together. That's, I think, an important way to communicate internally. Externally, I think it's different when you talk to the press, because they're, of course, going to be like, hey, can you tell us how this front office is going to be any different than the last, like, 3 front offices that the Red Sox have had that have been hot messes, that haven't done anything, haven't moved the needle? Like, what are you going to do that's even different than what they've done? And I think in that case, like, and I, as a baseball fan, like, have always kind of wished front offices were more like this. I would love just not even transparency, but just depth in the answer, and like actual depth, not just like using the buzzwords or whatever. But, I think an example of that would be something like this. First things first, we're thankful for the work that our predecessor did because, that's what we're building on. I think you talk about, what I talked about earlier, which is like the approach is balance. It's all about balance. We love the farm system that's been developed here, but we don't want its success to come at the expense of the big league roster. We want to make sure that both can flourish, just not at each other's expense. We're going to get creative with our drafting and with our trades in order to make that happen. This free agency class is a little thin, but there are a few key guys on the market that we want to look at. And we're going to have to move a lot of guys around in order for us to get ultimately where we want to go. But the destination is more important than the journey. And obviously the destination is winning. The only thing more important than the destination is making sure that we can get back there the next year and the year after that. Like, I think that's a very clear articulation of like, we want to win now, but we don't want to sacrifice our future to do it. But we also, aren't unwilling to sacrifice future wins for wins now. So I think it's that simple. Honestly, I don't understand why it's complicated. I think it's that simple. Anyway, guys, that's been our show. As always, follow us on Instagram at NotFromBostonPod. Substack, notfromboston.substack.com, patreon.com/notfromboston, and then listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back in 2 weeks, I think. And until then, go watch some baseball, go enjoy your time, and, go Red Sox.